Good afternoon. Welcome to Western. There's still a lot of space in front of this room, so if you would like to move down a little closer, you're welcome to do so at that time. I'll give you a moment to do that. I don't see much movement. Okay. There are some people. Okay, good. My name is Sandra Alfas. I'm the director of the Ray Walpole Institute for the Study of the Holocaust, Genocide, and Crimes Against Humanity here at Western Washington University. I'm also a professor of German in the Department of Modern and Classical Languages. My preferred pronouns are she, her, hers. I would like to begin our program this afternoon by acknowledging that this land is the traditional territory of the Coast Salish peoples. Their presence is imbued in these mountains, valleys, waterways, and shorelines. May we nurture our relationship with our Coast Salish neighbors and the shared responsibilities to their homelands where we all reside today. We are honored that the Institute's final speaker of the academic year is Brian Cladoosby, chairman of the Swinomish Indian Tribal Community and president of the National Congress of American Indians, the NCAI, founded in 1944, is the oldest, largest, and most representative American Indian and Alaska Native organization serving the broad interests of tribal governments and communities. To help us welcome our guest, Rudy Bendiola and his son, Cladoosby Bendiola III, will be performing the Swinomish Eagle Blessing Song. After their presentation, Professor Kathleen Young will introduce today's distinguished speaker. If you would like to learn more about the Walpole Institute, its work, and its programs, I invite you to visit our webpage or to follow us on Facebook and to stay connected about future events. And now it is my honor to ask Rudy and his son to the stage. Thank you.
Mostly jealous to see him. Hi, coming. Just a couple words I want to offer. And maybe a little correction. The song that we're going to sing is our Canoe Eagle Blessing song. And it's not a performance, it's what we do. It's part of our way of life. It would be like if I were to say, all you guys were saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I wouldn't call that a performance. Or if you were talking in your language, I wouldn't say that was a performance too. It's a part of who we are as Coast Salish people. The topic, historical trauma, and the intent of our discussion is to learn what happened, be aware of what happened, so these things don't happen again. These travesties, the breaking of a culture, the attempt to break a culture, does not happen again. So we're not here to blame, we're not here to accuse, we're here with an open heart and to learn. I wasn't going to, but I was asked to go ahead and say a blessing, which I will. I'll offer the blessing, and then we'll sing our Eagle Blessing song. And I would welcome you to join me in the blessing and think about things in your life, family in your life, people in your life that might be in need of a prayer. So we say this in a good way. Athletios natsaman, eat sananis, eat sachach sois nis kuchak bestois. Athletios natsaman, eat sananis, eat sachach sois nis kuchak bestois. Seed CM man latest now it's a squile, chachachuch snahusi CM, mach swin snap, mach hoy. Hashtag the Tanapen lights us while. Honest the Tiokaya Sapaleo. Elenas Chasen, Nas Chas Yach. Not Gwennis Suckwith, just ass. Gwennis, just ass. Mach, Isa, Hahach, Gwennis. Nis Quachakwa Sois. Dealeth Ukiosia, Ukwi Suxia. Dealeth Ukwi Osia, Ukwi twice. Dealeth Ukwi Osia, Ukwi Suxia. Oh, desist.
Dear friends, thank you for coming. I feel that past is in the present and present in the past when we talk about trauma. I have been talking about trauma and I study war for, I guess, going over 30 years now. And, you know, academics like to talk about their work, probably more than the people that are family with them always want to hear. And so I've been talking about historical trauma, and then when new research was introduced about epigenetics, epi meaning above the genes, and how what occurs in this life is oftentimes going to affect the future generations. These are things things that people have talked about forever. It skips a generation. The past appears in the present and into the future, 7 generations past, present. But now we have science catching up with us and showing us that indeed through gene methylation these things do occur. And as I was going on and on about this, I also had a student whose grandmother was in the Holocaust. And he was receiving information about his vulnerabilities, epigenetic vulnerabilities, because of that, because he was the 3rd generation, and because these things appear in the 3rd generation again, the stress of the past, the stress of his grandmother's life during his life. And as more research was done, other groups were brought into the discussion, and more science was added on to tell us what we already know, that the pain of the past is still here in the present. And sometimes what goes on in the present isn't post-traumatic syndrome, it is an ongoing syndrome of stress and of having to respond to deranged treatment. One of my family members then one time said to me, "You know, I heard this person speak about historical trauma, and he was really good. He made sense. He talked about things in a way that impressed me." And I thought, "Oh, good, that's wonderful." And the family member said, "You should have him come and talk to your class." And I thought, well, no. How am I going to even approach that? I just didn't think it was possible. Plus, I didn't have the courage to do so. But I didn't have to have that courage because it was already established for me with the establishment of the local institute for the study of the Holocaust, genocide, and crimes against humanity, where Sandra Alfers is our director, the first director, who is not only beautiful and charismatic, but gets things done. And she encouraged me to reach out. And I sent an email and then a phone message to President Cladoosby. And I, in that, said that I had heard he spoke about historical trauma. And as much as I had studied historical trauma, my ancestral background is only 2 generations, 3 generations deep here. And so I have no connection to the historical trauma of this area, of the Pacific Northwest. It's my home, and I've been at Western forever. But it wasn't until March, after all of these things were sort of percolating, generating, that I thought, who actually did live here? Who actually did live right here? And that sort of introduced me to find out who. And then it turned out that the 2 women who lived here were Samish, and that one of them lived on the lumber reservation at the end of her life, and that one of my best memories of my life was being in that house when I didn't even know it was her house, and that this land had actually been appropriated. It was a man called Fitzhugh who owned slaves that made the land claims and had these 2 women, wives, who were Samish. The land was stolen. We don't call it Fitzhugh Hill. We call it Seaholm Hill. That was their name. So it ties Western Washington University directly to this history. And to my surprise, I immediately heard back from President Cladoosby that he was willing to come here. And then we had the bad weather, and we had to reschedule. And so many things have changed. These are such historic times, and these are times of great pressure. And yet he took time out to come here. And so the past is present, and the pain of the past is still with us in the present. But maybe over time, with awareness, with language, and with ritual, we can change, and we can avoid repeating the same activities that benefit no one. So with that, it is my great pleasure, honor, to introduce President Cladoosby.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Great to be here. I'm only here because of the grace of God. I've got the greatest job in the world. Been on my tribal council 33 years now. I look at my good friend Nick Zafrados. Worked for me for, 15, 20 years. He predicted I'd be the president of NCAI. So we call him not Nick Zafrados, but Nostradamus. It's great to be here with you today. So where does the story start in Hollywood? Does it start at the beginning or at the end? No, it doesn't. It starts at the end and it works backwards, right? I've been the chairman of my tribe for 21 years now. I got the greatest job in the world. Got my wife here with me. She's been by my side 42 years now. We refer to her as the First Lady of Indian Country. She carries the title very well. She's originally from Lummi. It's one of those, we call it a marriage made at Swinomish. 42 years ago, we have a provision at Swinomish. We follow traditional ways of life. So if you are an enrolled member of any tribe in the U.S. and you marry into Swinomish, we will adopt you. So after 30 years being together, Nina made the decision to be adopted into Swinomish. So she is now Swinomish. You are a product of your environment. You are a product of your environment, whether you like it or not. You are a product of your environment. My dad quit drinking in 1976, is going to be 84 years old, and this week he was on the Skagit River picking net with my uncle, his deckhand, who is 67 years old. Putting king salmon away for the winter. Got videos. If you're on my Facebook page, you would have seen my dad and my uncle making a set on the Magic Skagit. He quit drinking in 1976. Nina and I quit drinking in 1989. We got two girls that'll be 39 and 35 this year. Neither of them do drugs or alcohol. We have two grandkids. 9. Nathaniel's going to be 5 on June 1st. My grandkids are being raised in a home for the first time in over 100 years, drug and alcohol free. So I ask you, what's the cure to destroying historical trauma? How do you destroy historical trauma? One generation at a time. My dad quit drinking in 76. I quit drinking in 89. My girls don't do drugs or alcohol. My grandkids are being raised in a home drug and alcohol free. I'm watching that clock up there. Are we on a hard stop? Should have said that. That was your first mistake. As you notice, I love to use humor. Humor is important in our culture. We say when the joking stops, that's when you're in trouble. My grandkids. How many of you are grandparents? Seen the best bumper sticker? If I knew grandkids were going to be so special, I would have had them first. Right? My grandson, 2.5 years old, I brought him to his first funeral. Said, you got to be really quiet now. Man passed away, he died. There's a dead man in that box over there. My friend walked over to me and I'm holding my 2.5-year-old and he looks at him and he says, are you the dead man? I hope not. So he began having this little infatuation with death. He drives by a cemetery to go to his house every day. My dad, going to be 84 years old, gray, and he's standing there, and he's looking at his great-grandpa. He calls him Greats, Grandpa Greats. He calls him Greats. He's looking at this side of his head. He's looking at that side of his head. He says, Greats, how come your hair is that color? Dad says, oh, I'm getting old, grandson. He says, no, I think you're ready for the cemetery. 2.5 years old, infatuated with death. My dad, we never heard him laugh so hard. I don't think I've seen tears of joy in his eyes like that in a long time. Destroying historical trauma. Spiritual health, physical health, mental health, emotional health. You need that. We need that in our communities in order to destroy historical trauma. Spiritual health, mental, physical, emotional health. You need that, whether you know it or not. Historical trauma, a term used by social workers, historians, and psychologists, refers to the cumulative emotional and psychological wounding of an individual or generation caused by a traumatic experience or event. Historical trauma response refers to the manifestation of emotions and actions that stem from this perceived trauma. Many of us have experienced trauma in this room. It's probably safe to say there is no one in here that is immune from some sort of trauma that you've had to experience in your life. How you deal with it is what matters. I have no animosity towards the dominant culture. I do not hate the white man for what they did to the Native Americans. We cannot allow them to let us feel that way. I remind people, especially, I went to a seminar, and I spoke at a seminar, Victims of Crime Conference. And I got up and I spoke, and I said, you need to change the name of your conference. I looked out there and I says, you are no longer victims, you are survivors. Change the title to Survivors of Crime. Because when you're a victim, that perpetrator is winning. When you feel inside that I'm a victim, you're letting them control your life. So I don't feel animosity because I'm a survivor, I'm still here. So don't, I cannot feel animosity towards the non-Indian or the white man because my father-in-law was a full-blooded white. My son-in-law is a full-blooded white. And they were such a blessing to me. So I can't feel hatred, I can't feel bitterness, and there are people that are like that. When they feel like that, they're letting them win. Historical trauma response is exhibited in a variety of ways, most prominently through substance abuse, which is used as a vehicle for attempting to numb the pain associated with trauma. HTR often includes other types of self-destructive behavior. Suicidal thoughts. We have 8, 9, and 10-year-olds killing themselves right now in Indian country. It's an epidemic in Alaska. Suicidal thoughts, suicidal gestures, depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, anger, violence, and difficulty recognizing and expressing emotions. Many historians and scholars believe the manifestation of violence and abuse in certain communities is directly associated with the unresolved grief that accompanies continued trauma. So I ask you, how do you have continued trauma in your life? Historical trauma and its manifestations are an example of generational trauma. For example, a pattern of maternal abandonment of a child might be seen across 3 generations. Yesterday I was with the president of Quinault, the president of the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians that represents 57 tribes in 6 western states. And they had a video of her with her 3 Alaskan Native children that she just adopted a couple years ago. And the grandmother was in foster care. The mother was in foster care. The children are now in foster care. Abandonment, maternal abandonment, or the actions of an abusive parent might be seen in continued abuse across generations. These manifestations can also stem from the trauma of events such as witnessing of war, genocide, or death. Historical trauma response can manifest itself in a variety of psychological ways. However, it is most commonly seen through high rates of substance abuse, alcoholism, depression, anxiety, suicide, domestic violence, and abuse with afflicted communities. Within Native American communities, high rates of alcoholism and suicide have direct correlation to the violent mistreatment and abuses experienced at boarding schools or residential schools. The loss of cultural heritage and identity these institutions facilitated. Although many present-day children never experienced, and I've heard this, why do you keep talking about historical trauma? That didn't happen to you. That happened to your grandparents and great-grandparents. Get over it. Do you believe that the history of the U.S. is whitewashed? Do you think today teachers, educators whitewash American history? Why do you think they do that? Denial. They're in the Egyptian river. Denial. They're in denial. They're all wet. They got their heads stuck in the sand. They do not want to teach American history because it's so darn horrific. In the Bible it says, I will curse you to the 3rd and 4th generation. And I had a hard time figuring out, God, why are you cursing the generations, the children to the 3rd and 4th generation? I had a hard time understanding that. Because the Bible says that God will not hold you responsible for the sins of your parents, but is cursing the children to the 3rd and 4th generation. I had a hard time figuring that out. It's not because he was cursing them, it was because of the choices that they were making. How many have heard this? What are the worst wounds that we deal with in life? The worst wounds.
Selfish. The ones you can't see.
What are the worst wounds? I've got 4 stitches in my thumb right now. The worst wounds that we suffer from in our lives are self-inflicted. Self-inflicted wounds are the worst wounds that we deal with. Why did I start drinking alcohol at 8 years old? Why did I start using marijuana at 12? Why did I try LSD at 14? Why was I sharing a bottle of beer with my dad at 16 and drinking a 5th of Black Velvet with him at Christmas? Choices. Self-inflicted wounds. Didn't have the ability to say no. Sometimes we still deal with that. So I gave you an opening of what my life is like today. But where did this start? What was the genesis? I think that Native Americans have always dealt with some sort of trauma or not, with intertribal warfare and issues like that. But I think for the most part, 150, 200 years ago, things were a lot different. On October 12, 1492, Columbus wrote in his journal, the first day he sees the natives, the first thing he said is, they should be good servants. I, our Lord, being pleased, will take hence at the time of my departure 6 natives for your highness. These captives were later paraded through the streets of Barcelona and Seville when Columbus returned to Spain. 2 days later, October 14, 1492, he wrote in his journal, with 50 men, they can all be subjugated, made to do what is required of them. April 1493, Louis de Centegal, a patron who helped fund Columbus's voyage, made clear that the people he encountered had done nothing to deserve ill treatment. And according to Columbus, they are artless and generous with what they have, to such a degree as no one would believe but him who had seen it, of anything they have. If it is to be asked for, they never say no, but do rather invite the person to accept it and show as much lovingness as though they would give their hearts. These are the type of people that Columbus encountered. One of Columbus's men, in his journal, not long after that, said that while I was in the boat, the Lord Admiral captured and gave to me a very beautiful Carib woman. Having taken her into my cabin, she being naked according to their custom, I conceived desire to take pleasure. I wanted to put my desire into execution, but she did not want it, and treated me with her fingernails in such a manner that I wished I had never begun. De Queno wrote, but seeing that, I took a rope and thrashed her well, for which she raised such unheard of screams that you would not have believed your ears. Finally, we came to an arrangement in such a manner that I can tell you that she seemed to have been brought up in a school of harlots. How many have heard of Bartolomé de las Casas? Bartolomé de las Casas. His hand trembled as he wrote in his journal. He says, my hand is trembling. He says, I grow disgusted with the actions of these men. He was so moved by the experiences that he witnessed that he renounced his past life and became a friar. He became committed to social justice for indigenous populations. In one of his journal entries, he described the monstrous brutality of the colonists towards the natives, including nursing mothers and their babies. De las Casas wrote, and I quote, they attacked the towns and spared neither the children nor the aged nor pregnant women nor women in childbed, not only stabbing them and dismembering them, but cutting them to pieces as if dealing with sheep in the slaughterhouse. They laid bets as to who with one stroke of the sword could split a man in two, or could cut off his head or spill out his entrails with a single stroke of their pike. They took infants from their mother's breasts, snatching them by the leg and pitching them head first into the crags, or snatched them by the arms and threw them into the rivers, roaring with laughter and saying as the babies fell into the water, "Boil there, you offspring of the devil." We revere this man, this monster, this murderer. We celebrate his day every year. History does not teach this in the history books. Kids do not hear these stories. The history is whitewashed. 2 years through murder, mutilation, or suicide for the first time in their culture. Half of the 250,000 Indians in Haiti were dead. 2 years. By 1515, there were perhaps 50,000 Indians left. By 1550, there were 500. By 1650, the Arawaks, or their descendants, were nowhere to be found. If you do not teach history, you're bound to repeat your mistakes. Today, the natives, today, are subjugated to some of the worst races of here in this country. Not through this form of warfare, but through pen and paper, through gatherings. We just had one of the biggest anti-Indians in Skagit County in the last 2 weeks spewing hatred about me and Swinomish. This trauma is still being inflicted on our people in different ways. They're still tearing out our entrails. They're still tearing out our hearts, but in a different way. Why does this continue? Because we do not teach this history to our kids. It's not taught in the public schools. None of you read this in high school, grade school, or maybe not even in college. Because it's a sad history for the United States. They do not want to repeat that story because maybe they're in denial that it even happened. Using dogs to hunt natives instead of foxes. The hellish sport was referred to as the Monteria Inferno. Dogs were brought over from Spain, bred specifically to have a bloodhound scent, with the long legs and crushing jaws of a mastiff, used to hunt down and kill natives. Natives were even pitted against these dogs in barbaric gladiator-style death matches. A native would be armed with nothing but a stick and stripped naked, and colonists would entertain themselves by watching the dogs maul the natives. By decapitating them with their jaws, the natives grew to fear being thrown to the dogs as the worst form of death. Columbus's brother was disgusted by his treatment of the natives, and he had him arrested. And he had him shipped back to Spain in shackles. Once again, you will never read that in your history books. Your history classes will never tell you that the man that we revere and set up a day to honor was sent back to Spain in shackles because of his treatment of the Native Americans. When he got back to Spain, King Ferdinand loved Christopher Columbus so much for what he had done discovering the New World that he pardoned him. In just 8 short years, Columbus managed to begin the eradication of an entire indigenous population. He set the transatlantic slave trade into motion and established precedent for centuries of raping and pillaging by other European colonists. 1492. Fast forward to 1755. even before the United States was a government. 1755. The Penobscot people, one of the first ones to be encountered by the Pilgrims. And once again, helping those Pilgrims survive some of the first harshest winters. They were becoming defiant by what was happening to them in their homelands. And so they start rebelling. And so what does the king do? The king sets out a bounty on the Penobscots. He said, for every male Penobscot Indian above the age of 12 years, and shall be taken within the time aforesaid, and brought to Boston, 50 pounds. For every scalp of a male Penobscot Indian above the age aforesaid brought in as evidence of being killed as aforesaid, 40 pounds. For every female Penobscot Indian taken and brought in as aforesaid, and for every male Indian prisoner under the age of 12 years taken and brought in aforesaid, 25 pounds. For every scalp of such female Indian or male under the age of 12 years that shall be killed and brought in as evidence of being killed as aforesaid, 20 pounds. Once again, and it amazed me. You ever read about any Holocaust deniers? You think there are Holocaust deniers alive today? It was made up. Believe it or not, there's a conservative Republican talk show host who's a Jewish that is a Native American genocide denier. I listened to his radio show. And he wrote a book. And in that book, one of his chapters were, it's a myth that there was genocide committed against the Native Americans, and this is the history they want you to know and understand. That it was a myth. There was never any genocide committed against the Native Americans. I have the King's Proclamation right here, setting up that bounty for the genocide against the Penobscot people. Right here. Here's a copy of that. (1863), Minnesota, in the Daily Republican newspaper. It says, the state reward for dead Indians has been increased to $200 for every redskin sent to purgatory. This sum is more than the dead bodies of all the Indians east of the Red River are worth. If anybody has any idea right now what the value of $200 in today's money would be, could you understand why somebody would want to go out and kill a couple Indians and bring in their red skins? Any idea what $200 would be worth in today's dollars?
$20,000.
I have no idea. It would take somebody a heck of a lot smarter than me in math to be able to figure that out. But $200 back in 1863 was probably like $1 million. In killing Indians, you could make more money than a doctor or a lawyer at that time if you brought in enough. The idea, strange as it may appear, never occurred to them, talking about the Indians, that they were suffering for the great cause of civilization, which is the natural course of things, which is to exterminate the Indians. That was Special Agent J. Ross Brown from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. 1851. California Governor Peter H. Burnett, Governor of California, 1851. A war of extermination will continue to be waged until the two races, between the two races until the Indian race becomes extinct. 1853, the Wairika Herald. We hope that the government will render such aid as will enable the citizens of the North to carry on a war of extermination until the last redskin of these tribes has been killed. Extermination is no longer a question of time. The time has arrived. The work has commenced. And let the first man who says treaty or peace be regarded as a traitor. 1853, Wairika Herald. The handiwork of these well-armed death squads, combined with the widespread random killing of Indians by individual miners, resulted in the death of over 100,000 Indians in the first 2 years of the gold rush. A staggering loss of 2/3 of the population. Nothing in American Indian history is even remotely comparable to this massive orgy of theft and mass murder. Stunned survivors, now perhaps numbering fewer than 70,000, teetered near the brink of total annihilation. In 1852, the government paid in California $1.1 million. Once again, what was $1.1 million worth in 1852? The government, the California government, set aside $1.1 million. Rewards ranged from $5 for every severed head in Shasta City to 25 cents for every scalp in Honey Lake. One resident of Shasta City wrote about how he remembers seeing men bringing mules to town, each laden with 8 to 12 Indian heads. Other regions passed laws that called for collective punishment for the whole Indian village for crimes committed by one Indian, up to the destruction of the entire village and all of its inhabitants. These policies led to the destruction of as many as 150 native tribes in California. $1.1 million 1 year was not enough. So the California legislature had to allocate another $410,000 for the same purposes because $1.1 million allocated to hunt down the natives was not enough. On April 22nd, 1850, the California government passed the Act for the Government and Protection of Indians. Sounds good, doesn't it? Sounds like it has good intentions. The law allowed for any white settler to enslave an Indian children with the permission of the parents. Or if the child was orphaned. Since Indians weren't allowed to testify in court against a white, this gave white settlers free rein to grab up any Indian child that was found. Most didn't even bother with the laws and just gathered and purchased them outright. To give an idea of how the authorities treated the law, here's a letter written by the Commissioner of Indian Affairs in California, G.M. Hansen, in 1861. In the month of October last, I apprehended 3 kidnappers, at least he called them what they were, about 14 miles from the city of Marysville, who had 9 Indian children from the ages of 3 to 10 years of age. They were taken from the Eel River in Humboldt County. One of the 3 was discharged on writ of habeas corpus upon the testimony of the other 2, who stated that he was not interested in the matter of taking the children. After his discharge, the 2 made an effort to get clear by introducing the 3rd one as a witness, who testified it was an act of charity. on the part of the two to hunt up the children and then provide homes for them. Charity. To hunt these children and provide a home for them. They went on to say, because their parents had been killed, we were doing a charitable thing for these kids. Since their parents were dead, we needed to take them in ourselves. And the Commissioner of Indian Affairs says, how did you know that the parents had been killed? Because he said, I killed them myself. The Alta California newspaper, 1860. The attacking party rushed upon them, blowing out their brains and splitting their heads open with tomahawks. Little children in baskets and even babes had their heads smashed to pieces or cut open. Mothers and infants shared the same phenomenon. Many of the fugitives were chased. Were chased or shot as they ran. The children, scarcely able to run, toddled toward the squads for protection, crying with fright, but were overtaken, slaughtered like wild animals, and thrown into piles. By the mid-1860s, a 90% attrition rate happened to the Native Americans in California. It is comparable to the Armenian genocide of 1915 to 1917. Why is this history not taught? Why aren't our kids required to learn this? I think the Native American people would be looked at different today. I am the president of the National Congress of American Indians. I advocate for 567 tribal nations across the U.S., and I've traveled extensively. By the end of this year, I'll probably have close to 500,000 miles in airtime flying around the country, visiting these communities, and reading and hearing and seeing the same racism that we encounter here. And it's not even subtle in some places. It is pretty open. We're not going to change everybody's mind. We're not going to change their perception of the Native American if we start teaching history like we should. But I think it'll go a long ways in giving the American people a true understanding of what happened in history. A history that needs to be taught. How many of you know in Germany right now today, it is required learning for kids in grade school, middle school, elementary school to learn about the Holocaust? How many of you know that? It is required learning. Why is it not required learning in the U.S. to teach the true history about the Native American and what happened to them? My grandfather was born in 1899. Ernest Cladoosby Sr. He was born in 1899. My dad's father. My dad's Indian name is Kelkaltsut. Kelkaltsut. He's the great-grandfather to my grandchildren. His great-grandfather also carried the name Kelkaltsut. His great-grandfather signed the Point Elliott Treaty for the Swinomish tribe in 1855. My dad is 84, he's still alive as the great-grandfather to my grandchildren, and his great-grandfather in 1855 signed the Point Elliott Treaty. When you look at it from that perspective, and I just read this the other day, those treaties are old, we should get rid of them. Well, the Constitution is old, and we should get rid of it too. My grandfather was born in 1899. In 1919, at the age of 20, he was still a prisoner of war by the U.S. government. He was still being held in a boarding school in Oregon against his will. At 20 years old, they would not allow him to leave. At 20 years old, he was in Oregon. And they brought our kids hundreds of or thousands of miles away because they knew the parents were too poor to go get them, and the kids did not know how to get back home. I had a friend that just died a few years ago in his 80s. For 12 years, he was from Wisconsin. He was made to go to Kansas. For 12 years, he was made to live in a boarding school, never ever going home once. The best present he ever got was a Christmas card from his mom that had 10 cents in it. That was his best gift ever in his entire life. Receiving that 10 cents from his mom at Christmas. What was your best Christmas present ever? And how do you value it? Do you think that 10 cents is worth more than the greatest gift you ever got? We just buried an elder here at Lummi. At 6 years old, he was taken to the boarding school in Oregon. He was made to stay there till he was 14 when he was finally allowed to go home. And on his dying bed, I asked him, I said, how often did you get to go home in those 8 years? And he found that question very, very strange and awkward. And he looked at me with a funny look saying, thinking to himself, going home, he says, I never went home. How many of you would like to be ripped out of your home, sent to a boarding school for 8 to 12 years, never to see your parents, grandparents, or brothers and sisters? In 1919, at 20 years of age, my grandfather said, enough is enough. Come hell or high water, whatever that's supposed to mean. I use it all the time. These sayings are going to hell in a handbasket. What's that mean? He didn't say come hell or high water. I just threw that in there. But at 20, he made the decision, I've had enough of this boarding school. I'm going home. At 20 years of age, the director of the Indian Training School in Salem, Oregon, wrote, August 2nd, 1919, I am sorry to have to report that Ernest Cladoosby deserted last night. And we have been unable to locate him. I presume he is on his way to his home near LaConner, Washington, and I would be pleased to have you make an effort to apprehend him and to have you notify me as soon as he has been located so that I can send someone after him. Any assistance you may be able to give will be highly appreciated. Prisoner of war, he deserted from a boarding school that he was sick of at 20 years of age. How many of you are 20 in here? How'd you like to be taken off in 1919 from Salem, Oregon to LaConner, Washington because you were sick of Western? Okay, school year's just about over. I know you're not sick of Western. That was August 2nd, 1919, summertime, when the kids should be home with their parents, learning the traditions that had been taught since time immemorial, learning how to catch that fish, learning how to make those baskets, learning how to gather those berries, learning how to carve a canoe. His rite of passage was stolen from him. That was August 2nd. August 5th. I was just advised that Ernest Cladoosby deserted during the night. Please, I ask that Ernest be apprehended and we be notified as soon as the boy is located so that someone may be sent after him. Please help Superintendent Hall apprehend Ernest Cladoosby and return him back to us. August 13th, 1919. Almost 2 weeks after my grandfather deserted. now is AWOL. They have the authorities looking for him. This is 2 generations ago we're talking about. This isn't 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago. This is my grandfather I'm talking about. I didn't know how many of you have grandparents. 2 weeks. It has been reported that Ernest Cladoosby enlisted in Seattle in the Navy. He told his brother that I am going to the Navy. We have not seen the boy ourselves and thought it best to notify you by wire that you might have time to make arrangements either to have me hold Ernest for you or to meet them in Seattle when he reports to the recruiting officer at the Navy station. They're not giving up. That's our property. I don't care if he enlisted in the Navy. Let's go to that recruiting center and let's take him back home where he belongs. August 16th, 1919. 3 days later. Ernest Cladoosby enlisted in the Navy. He was apprehended in Portland while en route to San Francisco and returned to Chemawa. They achieved their goal. They got their property back. Two weeks, 16 days to the time he left, or deserted the boarding school. He was apprehended, and he ended up back in Chemawa, and I can't even imagine the beatings he took for deserting. It was probably unthinkable. After talking with the recruiting officer in Seattle, I had no choice but send him to San Francisco. August 19th, 20 days after he escaped from the superintendent of the school in Salem, Oregon. I am sorry but not surprised to learn of Ernest's escapade, but hope that his naval experience at least may make a man of him. He has too little real fundamental character or stamina to be given much leeway, and is at times wayward and headstrong. I always wondered where I got that. With at other times some very attractive appearances, he will have in the Navy the control and discipline that he needs, and it may prove his salvation. When you suffer from trauma, whether you know it or not, you need some type of medication to get through it. My grandfather joined the Navy. That trauma stayed with him his entire life. He turned to alcoholism for that medication that he needed to deal with it. He passed that on to my father. My father passed it on to me. It's generational. We encountered for the first time in our culture alcohol and drug abuse, domestic violence, the raping of our women, the killing of our children, and the worst of all, suicide. But we're not victims. We're survivors. We're still here. I got some of the greatest friends in Northern and Southern California that experience, their elders experience some of the worst atrocities committed vibrant and strong. We are survivors. My goal, not only leading the Swinomish people, but leading this nation of tribal nations, is to destroy historical trauma one generation at a time. And the genesis of the majority of our historical trauma was the boarding school experience. So what are we using today to destroy historical trauma? Education. The thing that caused a lot of our problems. We are using education to destroy historical trauma one generation at a time. A year ago Christmas, 37-year-old mother of 5, we watched her die in ICU for 3 weeks as a result of drug and alcohol abuse. Her mom was there, her grandmother was there, her 5 kids were there, her siblings were there. We had to watch this girl die for almost 3 weeks in ICU and in the hospital. It was sad. I have no idea how much we spent on health care for that one person watching her die. A couple months later, a family walks into our council chambers, raising their hands to us like this, thanking us. At Swinomish, if you get a diploma from high school or you get a GED, we will give you a full ride scholarship to the school of your choice anywhere in the world. You can go to school as long as you want. As long as you pass your classes. That family walked into our council chambers with their hands raised up because we just invested $140,000 into their daughter's education at University of Washington. She had her diploma. 4 years of school, all paid for. It wasn't a drain on our budget. It was an investment in the future. That girl, she's got a well-paying job at Swinomish. She's not a drug dealer, drug abuser. You won't see her at the drug house, the crack house. She'll never be in front of a judge unless she gets a speeding ticket. She'll never be in jail. She'll never be in prison. She'll never be a drain on our program. She'll never be laying in ICU for 3 weeks, hooked up to a machine, dying. We probably paid over $250,000 watching that girl die. And at 37 years old, her drinking career started like mine at a very young age. But unfortunately, she couldn't quit. And she was always in and out of jail. She was a deadbeat mom, couldn't raise her kids, always on welfare, always on food stamps. This girl that graduated will never be on welfare. She'll never be on food stamps. She'll be a productive member of society, and she will pay dividends in the future, because when she has kids, you know what? She's going to raise them in a drug and alcohol-free home, just like she was raised. So my goal, destroy historical trauma, one generation at a time, through education. That young lady just got accepted to Arizona State University. She will be going to get her master's this fall. She will be going with 2 other Swinomish girls who will be graduating this year and making the trip down to Arizona State University, so they will not be alone and it will be fully paid for. Because it's an investment. It's not a drain on our budget. It's not something we worry about. Because those girls, when they graduate, they're going to come home. They're going to be productive members of society. Neither of those girls do drug or alcohol. Neither of them. They're raised in a drug and alcohol-free home. They'll never be on food stamps. They'll never be on welfare. but they need to understand historical trauma. So Lord willing, the United States of America will get its act together and teach the history like it should be taught and not be ashamed of it, but embrace it. Because if you do not teach history, you're bound to repeat it. God bless you, and thank you very much.